Please join me in our chalice lighting words. We gather this hour as people of faith, with joys and sorrows, gifts and needs. We light this beacon of hope, sign of our quest for truth and meaning, in celebration of the life we share together. Will you join me in a moment of meditation, prayer, and shared silence? Allow your feet to find the floor. Take in a deeper breath, and your shoulders may drop down a bit from your ears. I pull carefully down the driveway, aware of the ice along the pavement. But before turning into the garage, I wait just for a time, watching the snow fall. My hands loosen their grip on the steering wheel. The car is warm and cozy from the blast of heat, and my breath makes condensation on the windows as I sit. The world is soft, quiet, drenched in a beautiful white glisten. Slowly, the tension of the day, all the things that had seemed so urgent and important just a few blocks away, slide out of my mind. Whatever resentment or anger or grief I had been storing up unfolds, and I let it dissolve in the corner of my heart where I keep forgiveness and letting go. Hafiz, centuries ago, wrote, "Even after all this time, the sun never says to the earth, 'You owe me.' Look what happens with a love like that. It lights up the whole sky. Look what happens with a love like that. Look what happens in sunshine like this. What happens in a snowfall on a dark night like this. Even midnight is turned bright. Even the darkest hour not so lonely with the company of falling snow. With a love like that, the sun lights the whole sky. With a love like this, we face the coldest night. With a love like this, we brave the unknown each morning. And even after all this time, we do not say to one another, 'You owe me.'" Amen, and blessed be. May the silence we have shared continue to hold and heal us all.
Let me begin by saying, I love bacon. Yes, bacon, meat candy. Everything tastes better with bacon. The fifth food group bacon. I know. Bacon is not good for me. It appears to be carcinogenic. Bacon is not good for the earth. Raising bacon, pigs actually, does a lot of damage to the global ecosystem. And still, I love bacon, especially with a side of eggs. My desire for bacon made it very difficult for me to respond positively when a vegan friend, not just a vegetarian friend, a vegan friend, challenged me and all his other bacon-loving compadres to 30 days of eating clean and vegan. I would have to give up bacon. That feels a lot like Lent to an ex-Catholic like me. And I would also have to give up butter, cheese, cream, eggs, the other 4 food groups. I just couldn't do it. But I really like Bill. He's a good friend. And so I decided to meet him halfway. On January 6th, 2015, I began a month of vegetarian eating. It was hard. I ate a lot of beans and rice, and kale, and pasta, and kale. I made it 11 days. And you know what did me in? Actually, it was salmon. But I had bacon the next morning, and I never looked back. For 11 short days, I changed. And then I changed back. It can be so tough to change, to really change, don't you think? I had such a hard time with this small change to my diet and planned from the outset as temporary. No meat. What could be so hard about that? Have you two experienced that challenge of making changes that seem simple enough? A little more exercise each week, a little less screen time each day, a little more conversation at the family dinner table, a little less time at the office desk, a little more mindful presence, a little less dwelling on the past? Carolyn Mace claims that if we let go of things like bacon, our life is going to change. And the reality is, we actually are more afraid of change than we are of death. She might be right, at least in my case. How about in yours? In his poem, What Happens When We Stop Living, Nathan C. Walker writes, "Our lives can be hypnotized by the monotonous commutes, multiplied by the flickering fluorescent light that falls upon the micromanaging boss who thinks everything you do in your cubicle is an extension of his or her power. Who here is dying a slow and numbing death?" At a personal level, there is so much we want to change about our lives, so much that is unfulfilling, that can make us feel stuck, that can make us feel small, isolated, or alone. And at the same time, that step away from the comforting routine, that can be so daunting. And I'm not just talking about bacon here. I'm talking about taking that step toward becoming a more caring friend, a more attentive spouse, a more loving parent, a more engaged citizen. I'm talking about becoming a more whole human, aware of the interconnections of my body, mind, and spirit, tuned into my connections to the earth and the wide universe, and to the communities of which I am a part, and to all of you. I would just like to stop being hypnotized by the security of my life, a security that depends on the insecurity of so many others, and to which I have to keep my blind eye turned so I can maintain that illusion that it's all okay, everything is good, whatever, it's just fine. So how can I change when change is so difficult? How can I change when change is so frightening? At a different time in my life, I could change right now. At a different time in my life, I would have searched myself. I would have constructed logical explanations. I would have made plans to change. I would have plumbed my depths for willpower. I would have hoped that my resources, my reserves of strength and perseverance would be sufficient, and I would invariably come up short. But I've learned a few things about myself since I started serving at Peace Prince of Western New York. Serving at Peace Prince is part of my coursework as a seminarian. It's part of my ministerial formation. And I was called to step far outside of my comfort zone, to stretch myself toward experience new and strange and even a little frightening. Now I can't really imagine my life without the service at Peace Prince. And this is because of the changes wrought within me and whose continually ongoing mission, that agency's mission, is to do the work of hope and transformation. In order to transform myself, I have learned to look to others who are themselves in the midst of change. And here I mean not tinkering around the edges, adapting a little better to my current conditions, minor adjustments to my fit with the way things are. No, I mean something I would call desiring change. I desire change, all right, but I want the kind of change that itself desires for more, yearns and longs for transformation, for healing, for wholeness. I want, in Rumi's words, to fall in love with the agony of love, so the beloved world can fall in love with me. So I said I have begun to look less to myself and more to others in my efforts for that desiring change. And these specific others are ex-offenders who have spent endless time incarcerated in the New York State penitentiary system. Akin to the destruction and recreation that takes place in the chrysalis of a butterfly, they have shown me what real change looks like, how absolutely life-giving change can be. They're models for my transformation, and through them, my understanding of change has been undone and remade anew. Within the short time I have spent with a handful of men, I see that they embody precisely these words by Frank O. Holmes. Life does not call us merely to do over and over again what we have already done, nor does it call us to act out as puppets, parts already assigned to us. No. In the midst of a situation which itself is ever-changing, we are free to bring into realization new relationships of understanding and goodwill and new acts of courage. So let me explain. From workshops inside the penitentiaries to transitional housing on the outside for men on parole, the mission of Peace Prince is to assist offenders and ex-offenders while making what theologian Bernard Loomer called the creative advance, a move out of unproductive patterns toward an enlarged sense of self and reality, involving acts of imagination and leaps of faith. In order to avoid reincarceration, the men must fashion alternative pictures of themselves, envisioning themselves as the kind of people who can live as citizens when they haven't done that before. Clean of drugs and alcohol, making a living through work instead of through crime, developing life-affirming rather than death-seeking interpersonal relationships. Both on the inside and on the outside, they must engage in acts of imagination, creating stories about themselves toward which they can strive. The work of Peace Prince is to support and encourage this creative advance, as the men desire to move from a diminished sense of human life to one fuller and more engaged. The effort is toward not repeating the patterns. It's toward breaking away from the puppet masters of the past. But it is the responsibility of the men themselves to take that step toward transformation. Now, initially, I only understood my role of volunteer at Peace Prince as one of expressing kindness and compassion, and I could easily do that. I would resist judging, I wouldn't correct them, I wouldn't pull away from them. We would share a family meal and sit together talking about their lives and struggles as they tried to keep to the change that they desired. And this is my role, to do those things, and I have found it rewarding and important. I have never been arrested or in jail for a crime. I'm not a drug or alcohol addict. Yet I learned that all of us are more alike in some ways than was evident on the surface. We yearn for change. We all face isolation and alienation. We all desire transformation. But still I wondered, how? How did one get to the point of being able to make change? How did they get to that point? What did it take to take responsibility, to walk imaginatively into a new future? There are lots of facts and figures out there about offenders and recidivism. The likelihood that someone convicted of and incarcerated for a criminal offense will end up in jail after they've already served time once. Once a criminal, always a criminal is the worry. The fact is that the conditions which breed criminal behavior, the lack of alternatives, the lack of education, the lack of social connection, hopelessness and despair, all those are waiting for these folks when they come out of prison. And when the environment doesn't change, how are people within it to change? And there's also a lot of information out there about what can make a difference. 12-step programs leading to sobriety, education programs leading to GEDs and higher degrees, mindfulness and nutritional training. These are known to work. These help men stay out of prison once they serve their time, and these programs are regularly cut out of state budgets, even though they have proven effective. But still, what is it that moves these men toward the choice to change? How do they find it in them to accept these opportunities, few as they might be? How do they keep coming to dinner and discussion at Peace Prince each week? A commitment that involves often multiple buses they're not allowed to drive, and strict curfews. They can't be out after 8:30. I wanted to know how they managed to take responsibility when there was so much in their past and in their presence working against them. I wanted to hear the stories of how they had searched themselves. I wanted to hear their logically constructed explanations. I wanted to hear how they had plumbed their depths for willpower, that's it, and their reserves of strength and perseverance inside them. I was waiting for their epiphanies. And then one day I had an epiphany. I realized that in expecting to hear that moment of clarity, that clarion call to change, I was missing what they were actually saying about it. So Jimmy's story illustrates well what I mean. And this is a true story, though I've changed the names of the men to protect their privacy. Sharing in group on Wednesday evening, Jimmy began very emotionally in gratitude for his life and his family. He was 9 months clean with just one small lapse 6 months ago, the first time in his entire life he had been clean for more than a week or two in over 37 years. And that one lapse could have sent him back to jail if his parole officer and his counselor hadn't been sympathetic and believed that it was just a lapse and not the first step down the bad road. He expressed pain at the loss of his wife and children. But a grown daughter in Texas had reached out to him on Facebook, and they were beginning a new relationship together. He is now cured of hepatitis C, and he couldn't believe that New York State had paid so much money for the treatment for a person like himself. Carlos, the discussion facilitator, gently prompted him to talk about his next steps, and Jimmy shared that he was thinking about getting his GED, but he was worried. I'm slow. I don't think so well. Reading is hard for me. His counselor in one of the programs he attends kept bringing it up, though, and so he was thinking about it. 3 or 4 of the other men jumped in with their stories and their encouragement. Dave had just started classes at ECC, that's Erie Community College. He had been incarcerated for 38 years. Leonard had taken college courses while he was in prison. Carlos had gotten his GED on the inside, and he's now 12 years out, sober, and a registered electrician. Listen to your counselor, they all said. She knows what she's talking about. She will get you just the help you need. She has not let you down yet. Jimmy drank up all these words of reassurance and concern. And as was so typical of him, he reflected back to us his appreciation and his respect, his gratitude that counselors and ex-cons and straight citizens cared enough about him to offer him that reassurance and concern. A guy who for 37 years had cared for nothing but doping and all that he could do to keep himself in drugs. It is as if he could not see that he was worthy of sobriety and communal dinners and health care and education. He was worthy of it. But he didn't think he was worthy of any of it until others saw him as worthy of it. And that's when I finally had my epiphany. When I saw how it was that a person got to the place of desiring change. It is not solely from within oneself. It is not accomplished alone. Rather, it was accomplished in community. As Simone de Beauvoir said, one's life has value as long as one attributes value to the life of others by means of love, friendship, indignation, and compassion. On the inside and the outside, Jimmy observed men trying to change their lives, desiring a better life for themselves, wanting to transform themselves. He saw that happening. And Jimmy, as each man witnessed, those imaginative struggles of others wanting change and those trying to help them through it, he took a little piece of that struggle inside himself and it started to blossom. When he got out of jail, he saw these same struggles around him and he could continue to participate in them because he already had the spark, because he already had the ground of community within which and through which he could imagine a life for himself that did not involve living outside the law with the loss of freedom that goes with it. We are not alone. And the recognition of the need for community is what makes any of us become who we can become. We create each other. We live within relationships. Thus, we are all becoming more alive through the intersections of our emotions, our memories, our concerns, and our wounds, through our privilege and our lack of it, through the experiences and knowledge that we bring to and share with each other. There is no me without community. There is no any of us without all of us, all engaged in the creative force of our interrelationships and the whole wide universe together. In the words of Muhammad Iqbal, which is reading 610 in your hymnal if you want to look at it later, where in our hearts is that burning of desire? It is true that we are made of dust, and the world is also made of dust, but the dust motes are rising. Whence comes that drive in us? We look to the starry sky, and love storms in our hearts. My heart and my eyes are all devoted to that vision. And so, to achieve that desiring change, that stuff in us, around us, and in us, enabling transformation, I ask you, can you welcome prisoners? Maybe you want to work at Cephas Attica, which is a discussion group with ex-offenders in the Rochester area. Or maybe you would feel compelled to work for changes in prison programming, encouraging the reinstatement of programs that create a fabric of hope through which the hopeless can reimagine themselves as part of a larger community. Or maybe that's not comfortable for you. But can you imagine working for better public schools? Because if we start sooner with fragile people, we give them a path, we put them in that fabric that gives them hope earlier in those formative times. Those children who are so vulnerable, who didn't ask to be born to whom and where they are born, any more than any of us asked to be born to whom and where we are born. My own ability to change, to take a larger part in the imaginative creation of reality and of myself, it's bound up with the Men of Peace prints. Now and forever, I'm stuck with them. And really all manner of vulnerable people, way more vulnerable than my own experience. Those of us here and the ex-offenders may seem worlds apart on the surface, but we are all in this together. And only together can we create the desiring change, the one that calls us into the grace of community and the unveiling of that holy spark in all of us, that spirit of life, that dust of the universe in us and around us, connecting us all. May it be so.
Reach out, take a hand, let no one stand unconnected. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again. Amen. Go in peace. Stay warm.
Join us for worship every Sunday at 10 a.m. at the Unitarian Universalist Church of Canandaigua, a welcoming congregation. We are located at 3024 Cooley Road, 4 miles west of South Main Street, Canandaigua, just north of the intersection with Routes 5 and 20. Look for the blue signs just before the turn. Your comments about this program or questions about the church are welcome at 585-396-1370 or at our website, www.canandaiguauu.org. Producer and editor, Daniel Brigham.